So if you've been around the channel for a while, you've probably noticed that my most popular videos are my character based runs. It makes sense, they are by far the most fun to record, as it's interesting to see what kinds of restrictions, or more likely, bizarre scenarios that will happen. Normally they revolve around characters outside of the game in question, for example Master Chief in Fallout and Fable. But just like that Benny video that got age restricted for whatever reason, this is one I have seen consistently time and time again down in the comments, so it's about time that I get to it. With that in mind, today we will see, can you beat Fallout New Vegas as Easy Pete? Easy Pete is a retired prospector living in the starting town of Goodsprings in Fallout New Vegas. Other than being based on a real life person, what most people remember about him is his fondness of dynamite and his unwillingness to give it to new players, as who really tags explosives in their very first playthrough? The rules are just like the other character based runs. I must look like Easy Pete as much as possible at all times and only use weapons that he would. This is of course much easier than normal, as his clothes are obviously in the game and his two weapons of choice are a 357 revolver and dynamite, all of which is incredibly easy to come by, so things will be off to a good start. Now with all that out of the way, let's begin. Character creation, and I do my best to make him as close to how he is in the game as possible. Unfortunately, the age slider doesn't really do a whole lot, so we will not have access to the hundreds of wrinkles slowly engulfing his face. You can either pretend this is a slightly younger Pete, or his son, Easiest Peter. You decide. As for his specials, well, Easy Pete's specials are as follows. Strength at 6, Perception at 5, Endurance at 4, Charisma at 4, Intelligence at 4, Agility at 6, and finally, Luck at 4. Considering I always abbreviate these to a letter and a number, I got a good laugh that the Dynamite Man's Charisma could be shortened to C4. Anyway, that's what he has in game, but we are still left with some points to assign. Jumping ahead just a tiny bit, his tag skills are explosives, guns, and sneak, so with those being his primary skills, I thought it was fitting to just put the remaining points into perception and agility, as they improve those skills. Finally, I just skip the traits, as all NPCs lack traits as far as I'm aware, so I'll be doing the same. Once I'm in control, I go to open the Pip-Boy, and it crashes. Alright, from the top I do everything the exact same, except save it this time, and then open the Pip-Boy and get to setting up the run. Naturally, the fastest way to get my gear is to murder the real Easy Pete with a revolver found in the saloon, but I didn't want to do that. I'm still going to kill him, just not that way. So I go along with the Ghost Town gunfight quests and persuade the variant Pete to hand over his dynamite. This, combined with a handful of 357 bullets I found lying about Goodsprings, is more than enough to deal with the powdergangers. I was being rather reserved with my dynamite for the time, as I didn't want to waste it on these powdergangers. Speaking of, since these character runs normally have some sort of ulterior motive, today's little side adventure is to wipe out all of the powdergangers. They attacked Pete's home, and for that they shall perish. But first I will need to look the part, and now that the town is saved, it was time. I found him while he was sleeping in his house and shoved a stick of lit dynamite into his suspenders, and then watched as he was slowly engulfed by the glorious flames of retribution. Truly, it's how he would have wanted to go out. Fortunately, he was not alone in his final hours, as an angel seemingly descended from the heavens to ferry Easy Pete the First over to the other side. It's just a shame that he got stuck in the door on the way in. Leaving Goodsprings, I murder Barton Thorne just because, as well as the two nearby groups of powdergangers at Jean Skydiving and the makeshift camp just past it on the way to Prim. I will be seeing a lot more of these groups, specifically me, not you. What I mean by this is that they obviously respawn after a set amount of time has passed, and considering they have next to no health, and every one of them has a chance to drop at least 2 sticks of dynamite, I would be coming back here quite frequently to restock on said dynamite. I figured I should just mention this now, as I'm not going to bother showing every trip back. We have more important things to go over. Granted, the thing in question right now is more powderganger related slaughter, but still. In an attempt to maximise my dynamite gains, I am mainly using the revolver for the time. Although on some occasions I just can't help myself, sometimes you just need to see multiple people go boom. With that in mind, I think it was high time to pay the nearby correctional facility a visit, seeing how they currently call it home. Despite this being their point of origin, it may surprise you to learn that I had a rather simple time carving a path through them. At the end of the day, they are still low level powdergangers, probably because you're expected to come this way at the very early game. In all honesty, my biggest enemy here was myself. As you can imagine, Easy Pete's drip doesn't exactly offer much in the way of protection, and when you couple that with the fact I am tossing a large quantity of explosives in small boxed in areas, well, it can and will lead to a lot of self-detonations, so to speak. I try to counteract this by using VATS for 90% of my explosive related activities, as it reduces the damage you take while active. It's also one of the only ways to effectively blow someone up with a dynamite. You may remember from my crafted weapons only run that the MFC grenades had a habit of just bouncing all over the show when thrown, and the dynamite isn't much better. Sure, I could toss them willy-nilly, but as of right now, I was trying to be somewhat resourceful with them. I should note that by this stage I had also produced a good amount of long fused dynamite as well. Long story short, it was just overall less effective than the normal variant. However, I did have another use for it in mind, but we shall cycle back to that later in the run. Before long, Eddie, the leader of the bunch, is disposed of, I loot more dynamite and revolver ammo, and can be on my way. Riding high off of the explosive fumes in the air, I made my way for Hidden Valley. Naturally, I always come here to grab the fast travel point for later, as well as some easy early game XP by wiping out the bark scorpions in the area. Well, today is no different. After I was done, I began pressing my way towards the crater, where I slowly dealt with the centaurs. They're slow, predictable, ugly, and don't inflict a lot of damage, so I can mostly just stand back and put the revolver to good use. I made sure to grab the holotape from one of the 2 deceased Brotherhood members before proceeding up the side of the mountain like a Skyrim horse. On a normal day, I would come here once my science skill is at 60, go through the door via the gate, and then just repair Rhonda for some incredibly easy levels. Today, things will be ever so slightly different. You see, Pete is clearly not a man of science, he is a man of action, so rather than fix the robot, he opts to kill the mutant. After using the same exploit with the gate and the door to skip the normal mountain climb or lockpicking skill check, rather than heading for Rhonda, I instead grab the key hidden in this mist-coloured rock to enter Tabitha's radio station and begin the fight, and immediately regret my decision. Even at this early level, Tabitha is rocking a super sledge. That, combined with my own weapon having a vendetta against my limbs, and I think you can see where this is inevitably heading. Attempt number 2, and rather than stay in the cage with the beast, I instead toss 3 sticks of dynamite and VATS, and then immediately leave. She won't follow you outside, so this gives me more than enough time to use my slower healing items, as well as refreshing all of my action points. This allows me to re-enter the building, toss 3 more sticks, which end up crippling us both, but bringing her just low enough that a final few shots from the revolver will finish her off. This of course levels me up, and as expected, I am maxing out explosives before anything else, because why wouldn't I? Alright, now that little side adventure was dealt with, it was time to refocus on my main quest, and I do not mean heading to Vegas. Oh no, there are still 3 more powderganger groups I wish to deal with, and I decided I would tackle the biggest one first, that being Cook's group at Vault 19. Naturally, the best way for me to get there from my current position is through the Black Mountain shortcut, so I do just that. The shortcut is free of mutants, which is nice, so it takes me no time at all to get to the other side and begin heading west. I made sure to keep an eye on my surroundings the whole time, considering how close I am to Quarry Junction. While it is certainly possible to take out Deathclaws with dynamite, in fact I think there is literally an in-game challenge to do so, I didn't exactly feel like wasting all of those sticks of dynamite when I could be putting them to much better use. The first group of gangers were actually already dead by the time I got there, thanks to a random gecko of all things. I mean, it works for me as they both have 3 dynamite on them each, that's just ripe for the taking. Right before the vault entrance there's another group. They are notable for carrying better weapons, and as a result, being the first bunch of powdergangers to actually give me some trouble. They weren't overly difficult by any means, like they didn't even manage to kill me, but they most certainly came close in no small part thanks to some of them having plasma weapons. Keeping my distance and hurling explosives was the key to victory in encounters like this. I realise that sounds like every fight so far, but I specifically mean staying far away for once as opposed to essentially dropping them at my feet and seeing what happens. With them out of the way, all that remained was making it inside the vault. Despite how aggressive and bloodthirsty I've been towards them this entire time, not a single one of them was hostile towards me inside the vault. Works for me I suppose as it lets me get the first strike, which as you may expect, is an instant kill. This is one of those combat encounters where I am so well fortified that I was never really in a position to lose. The first kill I mentioned was in the Overseer's office, which only had a single entry point that was also right on the corner of a corridor, meaning all of the enemies had to not only try and enter through the one door, but had to turn to get into it. Basically, this meant I was able to go full mad bomber and just toss lit sticks of death out the door, and they would kill or seriously injure anybody in their way. Or if they were hiding around the corner, I could easily throw one at the wall to have it bounce round said corner and take them out that way. The few who managed to make it in never lasted long. Again, that is a hell of a thing. Cook ended up getting severely injured due to being in the vicinity of a VATS attack on one of his men that whenever I got back in control, I just simply switched out to the revolver and put him down in a few shots. After that, I took a few minutes to check around the vault to pick off any stragglers, and then returned to the normal path of heading towards Prim like I didn't just go off on a personal war against a single faction. Despite absolutely mopping the floor with the Escape comics in Prim, I was having the absolute worst time trying to hit anything with the revolver. It's not something I've noticed before, but they do say every playthrough is unique, and I guess for me today, that's having the world's worst accuracy. Fortunately, my main weapon doesn't require me to be accurate, so it quickly resolves my issues. Now, once they're out of the way, I agree to find new law for Prim. Myers died during the raid on the NCRCF, and just like Rhonda, I lack the technical know-how to fix Prim Slim, so it was off to the Mojave Outpost to pick up a brief job as an exterminator. It's not like I'm just doing this because it's the only option. To be fair, out of the factions, Easy Pete seems more favourable towards the NCR, so that's who I'm going to side with. Once all that business was taken care of, I began pushing on towards Nipton. It may have been ransacked by the Legion, but we all know who else is still technically present.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did! Powder ganger? What? I mean, yeah, used to be, sure. Grenade!
For good measure, I also went and fixed Boxcars' legs. Continuing with some messed up but ultimately good deeds, I put the powder gangers and the crosses out of their misery. All that left was Voltblaze and Culta. I have no reason to kill him. In fact, doing so is ultimately a terrible idea, as it means I'm going to have to deal with Legion assassins at some point. Counterpoint though. For those of you keeping score at home, you will know that I have one last group of powder gangers I wish to deal with. I'm of course referring to the prisoners that the Legion took from Nipton. If they think that will stop me, they have another thing coming, and it may just be lit and filled with pain. Right before entering the camp, I had a very brief run-in with some raider types. Not a difficult or interesting encounter by any means, but one of them had the most realistic reaction ever to having dynamite tossed at him.
Holy shit!
I start with the old reverse pickpocketing trick to immediately dispose of one of the Legion soldiers, which I then follow up with 2 more sticks of dynamite tossed at the remaining 2. The first is left with a sliver of health, whereas the second is killed along with all the powder gangers. To be fair, they were all slightly injured by being in the blast radius of the exploding trousers not 2 seconds ago. Once VATS ends, I fire more than one shot in the vicinity of the survivor, eventually hitting him and clearing out the camp. With that being the last of the major powder gangers, I was free to continue with the actual main quest. For whatever reason, rather than fast travelling to the Repcon Center, which I had already marked on the map and begin heading north, I instead just kept walking from the camp and decided to follow the story that way. Novak had nothing of value to me. I thought that maybe Cliff Briscoe would have some extra dynamite on hand, but sadly that was not the case. Remember how I mentioned the assassins? Yeah, well, they found me already. Turns out they were waiting for me at the gas station just before the Lonesome Drifter. I was expecting this to be a much more one-sided fight in their favour, but in actuality, Easy Pete puts up quite the fight. In fact, I'm able to quite easily deal with the first 2, and it was honestly looking like it was going to be a complete breeze. That was until I poked my head out just the tiniest bit to throw some dynamite, and the assassin, of course, got the luckiest headshot in the world and killed me instantly. I would love to say that I got them next time, but they weren't there next time. No matter, they will no doubt pop up again soon, as they have multiple spawn locations from here to Freeside. Continuing on my path, New Vegas continues to New Vegas before I make it to Boulder City. There's not much to go over here as I just let the cans go. This is actually so I can have them all in one place later to maximise on the carnage. Considering the likelihood of those assassins showing up again soon is astronomically high, I figured I could do with more ammo for the revolver, and seeing how I'm in the area, I made my way for Quartermaster Barton and was able to purchase a whopping 666 rounds for the thing. Needless to say, that will do me for the rest of the run. After this, I did fast travel back to the Repcon Center, and yep, the assassins are back. And I am just going to let this scene play out as is, so you can understand exactly how I managed to evade them. Easy Pete has weaponized the jank, and we should all be very concerned. Rather than head for Vegas just yet, I made a slight detour to Nellis. After all, I'll need to travel there for the NCR anyway, plus Easy Pete likes things that go boom, so they should get along great. I lack the ability to pass many of the skill checks, so helping around the airfield takes just a little bit longer than usual. For example, I can't help the doctor out at all, as my medicine skill is barely above 10. I can still do the other requests, it's just that they take a little longer. I go to Pete first and attempt to bludgeon him with a book as there can only be one, and then it was off to Helios 1 to grab the parts needed to repair the panels. As for the ants, well, I simply just used the hundreds upon hundreds of 357 rounds to take them out. Thankfully, turning all these in along with a few missiles to Raquel is more than enough to max out their affinity. That's good. I really could not be bothered with the back and forth fast travelling just to help Jack score some Crimson Caravanussi. Anyway, with that I can raise the bomber, and now they have sworn their loyalty to me. Distractions aplenty, I thought, why not go sort out the Brotherhood as well? I swear I'm not trying to delay going to Vegas. This is kind of just how I play these games normally, just bouncing around the map with no real rhyme or reason. Dealing with Dobson is pretty fun this time. If for nothing else, I can make use of my explosive know-how to prank him whenever he next tries to use the radio. McNamara is very pleased with my efforts and wishes for us to work together further. While I could certainly see the benefit of having the Brotherhood at the dam, I feel like I've had a fairly one-track mind this run.
Did somebody say boom?
Okay, now it was time for Vegas. In the end, this is still me we're talking about here, so before I even think about setting foot in the tops, I have to pay another casino a visit. It goes as well as you might think for them. Now into the tops, and I convinced Swank to let me keep my weapons and to let me explore Benny's room as to let me find Yes Man. This then gives me the option to have Benny sent up and I can take him out. However though, this is where I begin to channel my inner Wile E. Coyote. Rather than simply shoot or throw dynamite at the man, I instead decide to rig up a dynamite trap on the stool he would be sitting on. Most people know this, but for the handful of you that don't, you can drop explosives from your inventory and then shoot them to have them go off. You don't get the XP for the kill, but it also lets you do the collective damage of all of the explosives at once as opposed to throwing them individually. As you can see, the trade-off is very much worth it. Now I can start working for the NCR properly. Their first quest has already been complete, that being to get the aid of the boomers, so all they need now is for me to either settle things peacefully with the Kings, or take out Pacer. I decided to go with the latter, and just use the same method I did on Benny. Crocker is not pleased with this, but it still progresses you to the next part of their questline, so it works out for you in the end, regardless of how bloodthirsty you are. I have seen to the Brotherhood Neo-Murders, so to stop on the backtracking later, I go and destroy Mr. House. I also make sure that I hit him with the actual impact of the stick for good measure. Anyway, once he's dead, it was on to Red Rock Canyon. The Longhouse is of course my first stop when I arrive, and considering they mostly have trail carbines and high-powered pistols, they will rip right through my lack of defenses in seconds if I try to fight them normally. Thankfully, I had a plan. A slight modification of what I did to Benny and Pacer. Shooting one stick of dynamite causes it to explode, which then sets off all the others in its blast radius. With that knowledge, I can essentially use sticks of dynamite like a sort of trail of gunpowder by putting them down in front of Papa Can and Regis, and then spacing a few more out over the ground and across the long table. By then shooting the one closest to me, we get this result. Sure, one Can and Carl survived, but that was amazing and worked out so much better than I ever thought it would. As for the Cans outside, well, they were a little bit more difficult. They move around too much for the previous trick to work, so I just had to resort to Old Reliable. Throwing them in vats and hoping for the best. They best me more than once, I'll say that much, but really it's just about trying to outlast a war of attrition. Eventually I just got an attempt where they seemingly weren't as aggressive and I was able to prevail. While I was also here, I made sure to grab this single dose of turbo. I only plan on using it to get a cool shot near the end of the run, which you will see shortly. With the Cans beaten down once more, I can turn in all the quests to the Colonel and get on to saving Kimball. Kimball's attempt at assassination plays out pretty much the same no matter what. So long as you take out the sniper, which I do, you're pretty much guaranteed for him to survive. This will then of course bring us to the Battle of Hoover Dam. I currently have 29 sticks of dynamite, and I plan on using all of them on the Legate. I of course still need to get to him though. Well, running across the dam is simple enough. I've done multiple runs where I just sprint past and ignore the Legion, and today is no different. Besides, the second half of the run you are accompanied by NCR Rangers. They can wipe out the Legion without you so much as having to lift a finger. It gets a bit more involved whenever I make it to the camp. I have to take out all of the Praetorians, and because I wish to save my dynamite, that means I'm doing so with the revolver. It honestly sounds a lot worse than it is. They all seem to have the worst range I've ever seen, and due to me wearing just clothes, I'm able to run faster than them, and I'm essentially just recreating the Revolver Ocelot fight from Metal Gear Solid 1, except this time I am Ocelot. What helps during all of this is that they seemingly stop any time they try to swing at you. This means as long as I never stop moving backwards, I will be fine. Stopping to aim is of course out of the question as it will slow me down, so hip firing is the way to go. It may be inaccurate as all hell, but it's safe and that's what matters. After a few minutes I'm able to finish off the final Praetorian and begin prepping for the fight with Lanius. As you might expect, I am placing the dynamite down and setting a trap. All 29 of them. It may be simple, but it's one of my favourite encounters with him ever, so here is the whole fight unedited.
And who are you to...
So I atomized him. I looked around for a while and I couldn't find a single trace of him. As it was very clearly a glitch, I saved and then immediately reloaded said save, and wouldn't you know it, it caused his body to spawn. I feel like being wiped from existence may have just been better, honestly. With that, the day is won, I approach the gate, briefly chat with Oliver, finishing the game and proving yes, you can indeed beat Fallout New Vegas as Easy Pete. Simple concept, but that may just have been one of the most enjoyable runs. There was just something so inherently stupid about messing around with the dynamite that put a huge smile on my face. If you've never messed around with the explosive chains like that, I highly recommend you give it a go. Bonus points if you can cause an explosion so big, it crashes the game. Regardless, that's going to be on this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. Try to have one of these videos every week. My name is Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.